Producer Seb's just held up a stat for me.
Well, I want to talk about Derby County because I've got an analogy on Derby County that's either going to be the most spellbinding thing you've ever heard in your life, or it's going to be an enormous waste of everyone's time.
This is the best prediction anyone has ever made because you were mocked.
Three massive centre-backs, good at home, up for the fight, start games well, give their crowd something to get up for.
It's the howler from all of us, but...
Can I go rogue?
I think I said Ellis Sims was going to be top scorer. I don't know what went wrong for me.
There's a theme, a narrative to this prediction,
I was
Simon.
so excited before the season, and this is what excitement gets you, kids. Don't ever get your hopes up because they just get dashed.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas. Hello guys, welcome back to The Sportsman Untitled. It's our final show before Christmas. We're very excited. I'm excited to have Gab Sutton with me as always and Benjamin Bloom. We've got a lot to go for today. We're going to look back at our pre-season predictions and see what we've got right and wrong so far and what changes we've made. But first, I mean, Gab, we spoke to Cameron Jerome last week. Time to maybe give that a plug. I thought he was great, didn't you? Oh,
yeah, great. I thought he spoke so well. It was lovely too. I grew up watching Cameron Jerome, so it was a real pleasure, and certainly 13-year-old me enjoyed that experience.
As a Birmingham fan especially. So if you haven't checked that out after this video, go and watch that. Get in the comments, leave a like, as always, all that good stuff. We've got a lot to cover today. Ben, let's start with some manager mayhem in the Championship. Des Buckingham sacked at Oxford. I think we're all a bit surprised by that.
Yeah, very much so, because I'm sure you've probably got footage of me talking to you from about 2 months ago and you asking me who's doing the best jobs in the Championship at the moment. We probably said, well, look at Oxford's start of the season. Absolutely brilliant, incredible promotion last season. This is one of those difficult ones where from the outside, everyone goes, that's not fair. He got them promoted brilliantly last season. But from the inside, there may be Oxford fans going, we're not playing well. It's a really bad run. I don't know. It's harsh, but maybe someone else might, have a better chance of keeping them up. It's a really, really difficult one to judge. I can see both sides of it. To me, I think a promotion like that, you have a bit more credit in the bank. But this is graveyard season, just before the transfer window. This is when changes. If you survive the October international break, this is when changes get made.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, isn't it? I think it's 1 win in 16 now for Oxford, but obviously a really good start to the season, Gab. There's just no credit in the bank in football now, really, is there? You don't get that extra time. He's worked a miracle getting Oxford promoted. He's done all right. They're out the relegation zone, but form has tailed off. Yeah,
I really feel for Des, but I think possibly the mistake that he might have made with the best of intentions was after the playoff final victory over Bolton, where he masterminded that playoff campaign for Oxford United brilliantly. He didn't give himself a week or two off. And I think that I understand why, because he's built this coaching career over the last 20 years. This is his big shot at the Championship.
So late on the calendar as well, that game, isn't it?
Yeah. This is his big chance in a mainstream league to really announce himself on the big stage as a head coach, and could have done wonders for his career. So I understand why he wanted to take that bit more time in terms of preparation. But I think it has maybe been a cost for him in terms of fatigue, where if you don't give yourself a week or two to switch off in the summer, it can affect the quality of performance maybe later down the line. And perhaps in the last sort of 15, 16 games that we've been talking about, where they've only won once, that might have been one component of it. But I agree. I think it's really unfortunate, and I think the majority of Oxford United fans are sad to see Des leave, given his history with the club as well.
Yeah, it is sad, isn't it? There's also 2 Premier League jobs up for grabs at the moment. Wolves, and obviously Russell Martin left Southampton after a 5-0 loss to Spurs. It looks like Wolves are going to go for Victor Pereira from Saudi. I think I've butchered his name, but never mind. Southampton, though, that looks like a pretty decent job for any manager. Do you think they might go EFL again? Someone from the Championship, Ben?
Well, we were just chatting before we started rolling about, with our EFL hats on, moaning that these guys don't get the opportunity and that Wolves are prepared to parachute someone in from Saudi when there are really good managers performing
Would they literally
really
be
well.
parachuting themselves?
we shall see what the announcement video is like when he arrives. But yeah, I agree with you, Simon, that it's a good job at Southampton, but it's a 2-year job, isn't it? Where you're expecting to be relegated, being you're 9 points back. Then you're expected to be promoted with Southampton and a parachute payment and the remnants of a Premier League squad, and then you're expected not to be 9 points adrift this time in 2 years' time. So you're looking for someone with that mid-term vision. And look, we can throw out the available names, we can throw out the hot hands, but what you have as well, Gab, very unique. What's the politically correct term we've come for it? Hyper possession football from Mr. Martin. You've got to find the right guy to take over the messaging, haven't you?
Absolutely. And I'd like to see Carlos Corberán given a shot in the Premier League. We've talked about him a lot. Of the Championship managers, Gab, would you like to see him as number one name to be put forward for a Premier League job?
I think he really deserves a Premier League opportunity, Carlos Corberán. I think he's somebody a little bit like Kieran McKenna at Ben's team Ipswich, in that I think he does have progressive ideas, but also knows how to create a balance and be good at things like defensive transitions and that kind of thing, and make sure that their teams sort of finely balance. I think that's a really important thing, especially in the Premier League, balancing what you want to do with the ball, but also knowing that you've got to be a little bit pragmatic at times as well. So for me, I'm not changing my stance on Carlos Corberán, despite a couple of months of off-colour form from West Bromwich Albion.
A couple of months of draws, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I still rate Carlos Corberán as the best manager in the Championship, and I think that's going to be proven over the rest of the season.
We've got a couple of Championship jobs up for grabs. We've just mentioned Oxford. Millwall now, Neil Harris managed his last game in charge. They've got a vacancy as well. Ben, I'm going to put Stephen Schumacher forward for this job, because the work he did at Plymouth, excellent. He's obviously not had another crack in the Championship since leaving Stoke. I think for a team like Millwall, he could be the kind of perfect in-between between a Neil Harris and a Joe Edwards, which is, I think, kind of what they're after. You've
nailed it, haven't you? Because it's such a unique club, and you've got this kind of iconic figure, Neil Harris, who manages to kind of do the job by being Mr. Millwall. They tried the Joe Edwards thing, which I think what you're suggesting, which I agree with, was a little bit too far across. They've got to meet, and you're saying Schumacher might be a nice meet in the middle. You're talking to an Ipswich fan who came up against Stephen Schumacher, and amazing managerial performance in League One. I know Gab might have a better view on me about how much momentum there was already there, but you can't rain on someone scoring 101 points and beating two teams way richer than him to the title then. So I don't mind that. And the normal other place you look is on the sofa on the TV. Whose agents are booking them on TV because they want jobs, although Mr. Rowett has already had a go at Millwall, hasn't he? So I think he might be linked with other jobs.
How about for you, Gab?
Yeah, I think Millwall are very much a unique club and I think the search criteria you use to find the right person for Millwall is going to look a little bit different to how it would look for other clubs, just because there's a certain style of football that their fans are going to respond well to, which is aggressive, up and at them football, with sliding challenges and real high tempo. And I look at the last 19 years, I would say only 3 or 4 managers have really made it work at Millwall. You would say Gary Rowett, you would say Neil Harris, I think Willie Donachie did reasonably well, and Kenny Jackett. Other than that, there's not many managers who make it work, and I think it's a very unique club, and I think the manager that does come in has got to grasp and sort of share the nuances of the club. And that way, you kind of... for instance, I think Joe Edwards, just saying off camera beforehand, I think Joe Edwards and Neil Harris as coaches, they're incomparable. I think Joe Edwards is 100 times better than Neil Harris objectively as a coach, and yet they're also incomparable as Millwall managers, in the sense that Neil Harris is a much better fit for the football club. And I think I think it's got to be really important that James Berylson, when making this appointment, factors in what the fans want and what they're going to respond well to, because Millwall need that togetherness with the fan base if they're going to be successful at this level.
There's almost a sense that it's kind of good for Berylson Jr. that Harris has now done it twice and he's off the market. Because while Gab was talking, I was like, well, there is no man on the universe better fitted to the Millwall job than Neil Harris, is there? And even having done the job once and left, there was still no better man. Now he's done it twice. That at least maybe for Berylson takes him out of the conversation. Okay, it's not going to be Neil Harris in it. Maybe it opens...
Steve Morrison at Sutton.
Would anybody be?
I could see, I could see that,
Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Right, Millwall lost this weekend, of course. Let's have a couple of looks at the weekend's action. Blackburn, for me, one of the results of the weekend, beating Luton. Is this 6 wins in a row now for Blackburn?
5 clean sheets.
5 clean sheets in a row, up into the playoffs. Amazing, Ben. We've got to start taking them seriously as playoff contenders, surely now.
I suppose we do. Yeah, I have a thing about 8 straight wins in the EFL. 8 straight. Someone in the comments will look up the stats. 8 straight wins. Those teams normally get promoted at whatever point it happens during in the season. So I think Wycombe Wanderers fans will be quite pleased about that in League One at the moment, won't they? But it's a hell of a run. And if I could reframe your question to take John Eustace seriously, what a job. We're going to come back to some pretty clanging predictions that most of us had for Blackburn. You're trending down, you're heading towards the bottom of the league, you've got the top scorer in the division, and you sell him. What happens next? You're sick for, coming into Christmas. So amazing from John Eustace. And he doesn't sugarcoat it, Gab. He says, I've been brought up to make my football teams hard to beat. They're going to be well drilled. Everyone's going to know where they are. That's going to be the non-negotiable. And then add in players like, like a Todd Cantwell, who, if you can rehabilitate, can be real creative. Someone like Ohashi, who's an interesting pickup, and pace like Dolan, alongside Travis, Hyam, your
the reliables.
Exactly. Yeah. He's nailing it again, Eustace, isn't he? And I know Birmingham fans have got a great thing going on. Well, you can speak to this down in League One, but that decision is still gets more ridiculous the better Eustace does, Simon.
I know he was in the running, or certainly under consideration for the Coventry job after Mark
Rightly
Robbins.
so.
They were really considering him. Obviously, they went for Lampard, but I think he would have been a brilliant appointment if we could have tempted him away from Blackburn. I mean, he deserves all the credit he gets, doesn't he, Gab?
Absolutely. I had 3 Blackburn fans on my podcast for the summer deep dives, and what was really interesting in sort of July was when I talked to them about on-field matters, there wasn't a huge amount of enthusiasm, but the minute you mentioned off-field matters, there was a lot of, that's where you could see that was where their heads were at, if you like, in the summer.
They're all experts on Indian government finance now, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So there was a lot of apathy, I think, from what I could deduce in the summer. And what John Eustace has done is he seemed to be able to kind of galvanise the whole football club. And he did this a little bit, a lot at Birmingham City as well. He seems to just be able to lift a whole fan base because he's such a down-to-earth,
so calm,
likeable person. Yeah, absolutely. So, loving John Eustace. And what about that? 5 clean sheets in a row? That's so impressive with those defensive standards.
Unbelievable. Are there any results either of you want to pick out from this weekend's action that we could have a little conversation about? Something that maybe caught your eye?
Well, I want to talk about Derby County because I've got an analogy on Derby County that's either going to be the most spellbinding thing you've ever heard in your life, or it's going to be an enormous waste of everyone's time. So there's one or the two extremes. Has anyone ever seen the Family Guy episode where Peter and Chris tried to steal hotel breakfasts?
No, but I feel I'm about to hear about it.
Well, there's a phrase called key card confidence, whereby they found that if they didn't, even when they didn't have the key card, they carried themselves with the confidence of having it, and therefore they'll be able to get in. So basically the principle is, if you happen to have a certain advantage, the way you carry yourself because of that advantage...
Fake it until you make it?
Kind of, yeah. So coming on to Derby County, to make that link, is I think Derby County, when they're at home, because it's an advantage playing at home and playing weaker opponents, they carry themselves with this energy, this aggression, one-touch football that we don't see any of away from home. And obviously sometimes it's harder playing away from home and it's harder playing tougher opponents, but I would like to see Derby County carry a bit more of that key card confidence away from home, and actually be a little bit more aggressive sometimes.
I love that analogy. I was trying to think of a good pun to make between Derby and Family Guy, and all I've come up with is Ramily Guy, and I don't think that works at all, really.
Given the time you had, I'd take that, Simon. Yeah,
that's a decent effort. Yeah,
not bad at all. Right, let's move back to our pre-season predictions. We're going to have a quick look back, what we've got right, what we've got wrong. It's a time for looking back at what we've done in the year, and we made some big predictions in our shorts in the summer, didn't we, Gab? Ben, you were on the show as well. For champions, myself and Ben went for Leeds. Gab, you went for Sunderland. This is the best prediction anyone has ever made because you were mocked. I don't think Sunderland will win the league. I do think Leeds will win the league. But Sunderland weren't even really promotion contenders coming into the season for a lot of people.
No, they were going to finish 15th according to my iPhone.
And you've nailed it. So take your plaudits, take to the stage.
Yeah.
Sunderland have smashed it.
It's just this, that the talents of Joe Bellingham and Chris Rigg, I felt like they were due a year where they just developed completely off the scale because they'd had a couple of years of regular experience. And even somebody like Dan Neil, who was outstanding in that 3-2 victory at Swansea on Saturday, he seems to have taken on a real captain's responsibility because he's been in that team for 3 or 4 years now and sort of taken on that mantle. And what I love about Sunderland and the job that Regis Labrise has done, and we've been talking about managers needing balance earlier in the podcast, is they seem to be able to know when to go and press. They know when to drop into a compact shape. They know when to look after the ball. They've got a threat on the counter-attack. That ability, there's not many weaknesses in this Sunderland side. And I think that means that you're not going to lose too many games. And sure enough, they've only lost 3 in 21 and they continually tick over points. So I think that's a really valuable thing.
They're looking very, very strong this season. Automatic promotion predictions. Gab, you had Leeds going up with Sunderland. I said Luton. Ben, what did you say for second place? I can't remember your top two.
So I had Leeds and Burnley, which probably parlays us into a conversation about Sheffield United and how brilliantly Chris Wilder has reorganised the club there. And let's be fair to us, we came in here before a ball was kicked and we were worried about Prince Abdullah and ownership. We were worried about transfer windows. We were worried about the potential exit of Ahmed Hodzic and Hamer, along with the likes of Archer, who gone. He's managed to keep enough of the cheat codey players. I know you'll know all about Harmer and Ahmed Hodzic is at this level I class, and I didn't realise that Vinny Souza as well is an absolute cheat code at championship level. Brilliant interspersing the youngsters in. Shame our blasters out for such a while, but Peck and Sariki, brilliant. What a signing Cooper's been and Souter. So as much as I had Leeds and Burnley down, I'm happy with both. They're second and third. Sheffield United I had them sixth. I thought they'd be in the playoffs. They've really exceeded my expectations with a brilliant first half of the season. They are poised, projecting for 100 points even with 2 points deducted.
Right.
That is stunning stuff. Bren, that's why we invite you on. Great stats, great knowledge. I had Sheffield United up there, I think. I didn't have them in the top two, but I just thought the individual quality would kind of show through. But it was a gamble because their squad was so thin at the time.
Also, for me, I had them in the bottom half because players like Vinicio Souza, who's been absolutely outstanding, he was a bit unpopular with Sheffield United fans in the summer and people were kind of questioning whether his heart was in it, and he's absolutely proved them completely wrong on it, and he's really defied his doubters, and it's situations like that. Somebody like Alfie Gilchrist as well, coming in from Chelsea, has brought some real solidity to that defence. So yeah, all credit to Chris Wilder. I have to tip my hat to him.
In terms of other promotion contenders / playoff winners, I think we all had Luton Town in the mix, in the top two potentially, if not certainly in the playoffs. Ben, it's a howler from all of us, but more importantly, it's a howler for Luton Town.
Yeah, I'm going to steal your line from earlier. Yeah, they've been dreadful, haven't they, Luton? Bless them. And this is obviously on... I did say this whenever I talk about Luton over the last few years. I've played the law of averages card of this club has been either on expectations or above expectations for like 10 years in a row. There's got to be one bad one. They're dreadful away from home still, aren't they? Really, really quite good. Rob Edwards was pointing out 18 points from 9 at home is promotion, usually 2 points per game, but horrifically leaky and loads of defeats away from home. I mean, from a human point of view, I'm glad to see Rob Edwards looks a bit less like the ghost he was looking like in interviews, looks more like himself now. And, you know, not that it's great that he's called out the players in a couple of games, but we're seeing some fight now. But we know Luton are not going to ever make any silly snap decision. But you're totally right. This is not our fault for the prediction. This is maybe some natural inertia after some brilliant years, Gab.
And top six in general for you, Gab, at the moment. We've seen some surprise names up there. Are there any changes you'd like to make from your pre-season predictions that you had in the top 6, maybe a promotion contender you hadn't considered that you'd now like to put up there at Christmas time?
Well, I think I probably have Burnley and Sheffield United in my top 6 now.
Okay.
I think you've got to include Blackburn Rovers in the mix. I think Sheffield United, Leeds, Burnley and Sunderland, I think we can all agree they're a lock for the top 6 and in top 2 contention. And I think it's going to be quite an interesting scramble for the rest. I think very curious to see whether Blackburn Rovers have the staying power. I tend to agree with Ben, like if they can get to 8 wins in a row, then you almost can't sort of overlook them. Right now, if you asked me, I would probably still go with West Brom and Middlesbrough, even though the Albion aren't necessarily in form. But I think Middlesbrough, just based on the rate of chance creation, I think they look very strong.
How about for you, Ben?
Well, I mean, I've got Coventry and Luton in my
We're going to have to talk about them, aren't we? I've been trying to avoid it.
in my initial pick. So I think we're all fairly well at peace that that's not going to be happening. Middlesbrough and West Brom have been there before, as boring as it sounds. You'd love to see a door open wide. I know Watford have been there before as well, but we're not necessarily in the playoffs, tend to have gone up automatically, haven't they? But that's been a great job by Tom Cleverley. It'd be nice to have a surprise like Blackburn in there. I did do a poll on my YouTube channel, and the general feeling is there will be a regression to the mean for Blackburn, and it will be the familiar names. I agree with Gab's premise that, I'll edit it slightly for my view, that I don't necessarily have Sunderland as a nailed-on automatic promotion conversation, but they've proved me wrong many times before. But I think they're definitely going to be in the top 6, and then, Middlesbrough, West Brom would be the kind of obvious contenders with, with Burnley, Sheffield United, Leeds, and Luton would be the one parachute team who are going to make a mess of their perceived advantage.
We'll come on to a bit of a surprise prediction later on. I think Middlesbrough are certainly going to be in the top 6. I'm very impressed with them. Big fan of Michael Carrick. I just think that 6th spot is open to quite far down the table. We'll find out quite how far I'm prepared to stretch that.
I would draw the line at Norwich, personally.
Okay, all right. I won't ruin it. I'll come on to it later on. Let's go to the bottom of the table. The bottom 3 as it stands, Portsmouth, Plymouth, Hull are the bottom 3. I don't know who we had going down, but I think Blackburn Rovers were potentially part of that conversation, Gab. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, for me, I had Blackburn Rovers going down. Now, I think I might have had Derby staying up. I definitely had Plymouth Argyle going down and Oxford. So they were my 3. So it's looking like I might get one of those, possibly 2.
And I had Blackburn, Derby and Plymouth. I think we all had the same concerns about Plymouth. Ben, where were you at with the relegated teams?
I had Oxford bottom, Blackburn second bottom. Have a good laugh at that. Blackburn fans, amazing performance. I had Pompey going down as well. Derby surviving, and Plymouth surviving. I just wanted to have a bit of a contrarian view whilst everyone was telling me Wayne Rooney was going to be fired in October. He's still here at time of recording. So yeah, I'd hedged a bit on the 3 promoted teams. I'm not unhappy with that, and yeah, fair play, Blackburn and John Eustace.
Yeah, absolutely. Who were we concerned about that potentially we didn't mention? I don't think any of us had Hull to go down, did we? Do we think they're going down?
I don't.
I think Ruben Sellers is a good appointment. I think he's built up an excellent coaching career for himself and seems to be very highly rated. So did a great job at Reading. So I would probably be inclined to back Ruben Sellers to keep Hull up. I'm probably going to stick with John Mazzino at Portsmouth as well, even though they did have a disappointing result at the weekend. So my 3 would probably be Plymouth Argyle, Oxford United, and who would my other one be?
What's your take on Cardiff while you're answering that?
Cardiff, well, they've got a bit cold, haven't they? I think there's been question marks over fitness because they started very well under Omar Ritza in his sort of caretaker stint, and more recently their form has dropped off. They've gone on a long winless run. So, yeah, I think Cardiff could be...
Do you see any parallels with Birmingham, with Cardiff, where they circled around there for a lot of years and eventually... one silly season and down they go.
Yeah, I don't trust Cardiff City as a structural entity, so I think unless there's ownership change, I think Cardiff City are going to be in League One before they're in the Premier League.
Simon, just on Hull, I think they've got way too much quality in the squad to be in the bottom three, but I've got a league table in front of me. They're 5 points off having 1 point per game, which we normally want 45 points to survive. So I like Ruben Sellers. Brilliant job at Reading in great adversity, and maybe working under Mr. Illichali, he's got a good preparation for that, because he doesn't say he suffers fools gladly. I don't think he suffers anything gladly and moves very quickly, but he's going to need to win to even get to the point per game. He's going to need to win sort of 3 or 4 games fairly quickly, isn't he, to be on the right numbers?
Well, I suppose if you look at the bottom 5 at the moment, they're separated by 2 points. Now, granted, Hull have played more games than everyone, but I think it's one of those where you win one game and all of a sudden it can change very quickly. I'm wondering a little bit, I think I've got a bit of faith in QPR in Marty Cifuentes because of the job that he did last season, and I think he's one of the reasons to really believe in QPR right now. Should we be worried about Stoke or Preston, do you think?
Well, Stoke will do whatever they want and then kind of magnetise to 16th place or something towards the end of the season. I was worried about Preston, but I think what we're seeing at the moment is typecast Preston now. 3 massive centre-backs, good at home, up for the fight, start games well, give their crowd something to get up for. That says to me they'll pick up the necessary results, and nearly beating Leeds at home is a pretty good barometer for a team that's probably not going to be in too much trouble.
It sounds silly to say after they've just beaten Portsmouth 4-0, but I'm still slightly concerned about Derby. I think they might have enough at home to keep themselves up, but I'm not seeing a lot of them on the road to keep them out of danger. I think Plymouth are in massive
Again,
trouble.
though, with Derby, Simon, to play my numbers game, if you have 24 points with 25 games remaining, you can be quite bad and still reach 48, 50 points, and you will probably survive. Sorry, Birmingham fans last year, but they didn't survive with 50 points. But I think your point about the table being crowded possibly means a low tide, that won't be many points, around, and draws might be more useful than they normally are in relegation fights.
Yeah, you say that, but then let's say Hull under Ruben Sellers against Derby, for instance, you wouldn't be surprised on any given day for Hull to beat Derby, because I think Hull have probably got a better squad on paper than... So I actually think that sort of the bottom half is going to end up being quite congested, and they'll all take points off each other, so it might end up being actually a bit higher than the current... Because you tend to find the teams right down the bottom tend to put a real run together towards the end of the season.
2 months, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So, we'll see how that pans out.
We all had a shock with Blackburn, but other than that, they're all kind of in the mix, aren't they? We've not done too badly there. Golden Boot, we had some predictions for at the start of the season. You guys said Latte Lath, I think, who obviously he's not quite up there, but he's got a chance. They're creating a lot of chances, scoring a lot of goals. I may have said, I've written this down, I think this might be a typo, because I've written Carlton Morris or Ellis Sims, so that must be a typo. I don't know what went wrong there. I suppose this brings us on to a conversation for the Golden Boot winner. Is it going to just be Borja Sainz because he's incredible?
Well, and the question is it going to actually be a striker? Because we've all been drawn to Latte Lath and Morris and Sims, and could it be a Sainz sort of playing on the wing and a narrow 10 would be called in the modern parlance? I'm quite pleased with hopefully you'll back me up, Gab, the Latte Lath pick, and Gab's already said it, the sheer amount of chances that guy will have made for him with Michael Carrick as his manager. But
Middlesbrough only play with one up top, and there's also Tommy Conway there. So Conway's gonna when
share it, yeah.
Latte Lath, might be a bit jaded for the odd game. Conway's going to come in. They're going to keep each other. Are they going to end up share the goals? So that could be one to watch as well. I've got a feeling with Borja Sainz at Norwich that the goals might dry up for him, because a lot of them have been long range strikes from outside the box, and I'm not sure that's necessarily sustainable. But you wouldn't say there's a current striker in the Championship that's been banging form the whole season, would you?
What I would say is that, interestingly, maybe the top 4 teams here, Sheffield United, Leeds, Burnley, Sunderland, they don't have that kind of 25 goal a season striker who's banging goals, and it is very much shared about all of those 4 teams, probably to their strength. So maybe that's when you do have to go further down the table.
Can I go rogue?
Go on.
Vakun Bio.
Oh, hello.
Good shout. Good shout. The last month or 2 he's been in great form, hasn't he?
You need a striker who's trusted by the manager, starting every game, getting a decent number of chances.
And they cross the ball to him as well, don't they?
I think that's a very, very good shout indeed, and that's a good place to
leave. Which would shock Watford fans if we wound back like a year, because I'm sure they wouldn't want him anywhere near their first 11, let alone the Golden Boot conversation.
It's the magic of Tom Cleverley, that is. That's what that is. Talking of Tom Cleverley, manager of the season, shouts. He's got to be in the conversation for it. Gab, you said Danny Roll. Myself and Ben, I think, went for Daniel Farker at the time. Not bad if Leeds go on to win the title. Pretty safe pick. Any managers on that list? We've already mentioned John Eustace. He's got to be up there.
Wilder.
Chris Wilder's done a fantastic job, and with all that went on over the summer. Gab, you were a bit of a critic of his and the team. But
yeah, I've got to hold my hands up. I think Chris Wilder has been brilliant. I think there's probably a different question. So if we're doing this now, I probably would go with John Eustace. However, I feel like if we're talking about what we think the official EFL Manager of the Year is going to be, what I find is that they tend to go for the manager that's won the league title, or that's obvious. They go for the top 3 managers in the league table, as opposed to the low budgeted manager that's got them into the playoffs. Because I think the EFL like to be quite obvious with their selection. So it wouldn't surprise me if Sheffield United did win the league that it would go to Chris Wilder, because he's done brilliantly.
It's funny that if the table had finished now and Des Buckingham had kept his job for keeping Oxford up in 20th place, I think I'd have put him forward for it. But that's not the way the world works. We did a discussion about managers to be concerned about at the start of the season, and we can blow our own trumpets here, right? Gab, you said Tim Volter, currently out of a job, got left by Hull City. I said Ryan Lowe was out of a job basically when we stopped recording that episode. And Ben, you said, I'm concerned about Cardiff, Hull and Watford's trigger-happy owners. So 2 out of 3, they're not bad. We've pat ourselves on the back there, right?
There's a Meatloaf lyric we can apply to that.
To be fair, we're on fairly safe ground here, aren't we, with Championship managers? Whoever you pick, you've probably got about a 50-50 chance. It's no, I don't know what the number is, Gav. Normally 12 will... I'm not, often 2 at the same club, but... There will be 12 sackings through a championship season. And, I think the real surprising ones, obviously, Mark Robbins, you just thought he was going to be there forever at Coventry. And you would have put Des Buckingham in terms of job security, once that final whistle went in the playoff final, right near the top, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of moving forward... in fact, no. We'll do our worst predictions first, because I watched a clip back of the YouTube video. I don't know if I'd had a drink. I don't know if I was in a particularly good mood that day, but I predicted Coventry to win the playoffs and score 90 goals this season. I think I said Ellis Sims was going to be top scorer. I don't know what went wrong for me.
There's a theme, a narrative to this prediction,
I was
Simon.
so excited before the season, and this is what excitement gets you, kids. Don't ever get your hopes up, because they just get dashed.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas. Gab, what's it for you?
My worst prediction, Blackburn I think we've already covered. I think got to be Sheffield United in the bottom half. That was a bit of a stinker there. I thought things were going to go stale for them under Chris Wilder, but no, he's proving completely wrong.
And what about you, Ben?
Well, it's really difficult, because I'm going to sound like self-preservation of content creators here, but there is a difference between a bad prediction and a team just completely doing shockingly the other thing. So obviously I've got Blackburn 23rd, I've got Hull in 8th, but if we'd have debated that, I would have probably sounded fairly sensible, even though I look ridiculous now. But I don't know. I think for me, I had QPR in 11th, thinking they were going to push on and build. I mean, to be fair, with the trend at the moment, they could still get there, but that was such a big surprise. The way they finished last season, and as an Ipswich fan, and to make it all about us, everyone was watching them beat Leeds 4-0, and at the end of last season, you think, okay, here come QPR back into the conversation. Just a really, really bad run. But will you tell me, are they going to be far off 11th come what may?
I think they'll probably finish somewhere similar to where they currently are. I don't think their squad's good enough for the top half. So I think Yeah, but I really like the work that Maia Cifuentes is doing. So I think they'll finish in a similar position to where they are now.
Producer Seb's just held up a stat for me saying an average of 17.5 managers have been sacked per season in the Championship for the last 4 years.
So I was conservative with 12 then, yeah?
That is remarkable, isn't it? Absolutely remarkable. We're going to look ahead now for the second half of the season. And a bit of positivity can return now. Who do you think the biggest risers are going to be in the table from now, Christmas time, until the end of the season?
Hull?
That's the first. I mean, they can't go any lower, can they?
The only way is up. I think Luton Town, one way or another, are going to climb the table because I think they've got Carlton Morrison, Elijah Adebayo up top, and I think that kind of firepower is probably going to carry them up the league. I think Rob Edwards is either going to make the required tweaks that will see Luton find a bit of form, especially away from home, or unfortunately, such is the industry. His job might be under scrutiny. So I would probably go with Luton as being the biggest risers. I think they could possibly come into that top half.
Where do you think Hull can get to this season?
Just depends if you get a mad run, because to your point earlier about congestion in the bottom half, it's much harder. There's this myth that someone comes from nowhere to win the playoffs in the Championship, and go and do the research and look how often that actually happens, because more often than not...
Because Blackpool did it in 2011.
Yeah, exactly. More often than not, if you look at the table around Christmas, you've probably got 3 of your 4 playoff teams already in there. I think we're on base with the potential risers there in the bottom 3. I would try and add to my point in the previous segment, QPR. I think there'll be some kind of trend up, but it is a bit of an open goal where you've got Hull, where the expectations were to go one better than last season and be in the playoffs, and they're currently bottom. They've got the most headroom. And would you even be surprised if Mr. Ilichali blew a load of money in the January transfer window? He couldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to not learn from my mistakes.
Coventry?
And say I think Coventry can certainly rise up to the top 8th, 9th position, because Frank Lampard's going to have a January window. We've got Cardiff, Portsmouth, Plymouth in 3 of the next 4 games we should win. By January, we could be on a little run of form.
He's so convincing, isn't he? He's got me buying into this already, Gav.
Couple of loan signings in January, which is clearly what we're missing. Lampard's got the connections. I don't think it will take much for this Coventry team to turn into a decent Coventry team, which could push... And that 6th place might just be still up for grabs, maybe.
You're going higher in your voice, aren't you? Ephraim Mason-Clark seems to be the big one, doesn't he, Simon?
Yeah.
Because he seems to have really come into form under Reece Carr and then Frank Lampard.
Yeah, absolutely. He's starting on the left
and
wing.
Also, it just depends on the recruitment plan. Are they going to do something fun in January? Because I think everyone's perception of Frank Lampard, the type of players he would bring, they don't come in January. That's a long-term play through the season, and they're youngsters that come during the summer. So you just, not to rain on your strawberries here to mix my metaphors, but you just might get...
an expression, rain on your strawberries? I've never...
I made it clean for the podcast, Gav.
Okay.
Think about it and you'll see what I've done there. But it might be an 18-month play, and they might really back him in the summer, in which case you might just be building with Coventry through. But look, if you're winning games, you're never too far from the playoffs, are you?
They'll finish higher than 15th. That's what
you would imagine so.
Yeah, I would imagine that. A managerial change or potential return for any of these Championship clubs before the end of the season. You don't have to talk about managers getting sacked if you don't want to, but potentially an out-of-work manager who's been in the Championship before, you could potentially see fitting a job here.
Gary Rowett's going to get a job.
Okay.
Because he's such a reliable Championship manager, and I think if you're a team in trouble, I think you go and get Gary Rowett because you know that he can solidify teams. His clean sheet record as a manager in the Championship.
Would he go in at Oxford?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, he's been out of work other than the Birmingham stint for a couple of months. I think it's 14 months outside that sort of stint. So I imagine he might be keen to get back into work.
My Millwall alarm's going off again for Gary Rowett to go back there.
Well, you mentioned Shuey after going out at Stoke. You know, it's just, and there's Ryan Lowe as well. People say managerial merry-go-round as this kind of tabloid cliche, but once you've got that on your CV, a Championship job, especially if you're someone like Rowett, who's top 10, 2-3 times, wasn't he, with
Millwall,
and got the playoffs with Derby as well, didn't he? So, yeah, he'd be the one. And as producer Seb has just said, there's probably another 7 jobs going to open up between now and May as well.
I think with managers getting sacked maybe earlier than ever, it also means that potentially they're getting sacked before they should.
When do we talk about Neil Warnock and his 18th retirement? And is that we schedule that in for the March podcast? Yeah,
let's put that in for the March podcast. I love Rob Edwards, but I want Mark Robbins at Luton Town, my former manager at Coventry. I just think that's a really good fit. Parachute payments, decent squad. He could get the best out of them, I think.
Are Watford going the whole season?
Yes. Cleverly stays.
No. Sorry. For Tom.
Tom,
Tom Cleverly will last the full season. I don't think Watford will last in terms of the playoff scramble. I think they'll sort of drop into mid-table.
He certainly has had a great season so far. We need a hot take now, a random prediction you think in the Championship that will happen between now, Christmas time, and the end of the season. Ben, have you got any ideas?
Yeah, I want to go, maybe you can help me flesh this out, Gab. Mm-hmm. I want to go for some kind of record-breaking business from one of our top 3. So at the moment, we have an absurd Sheffield United and Leeds home records. Mm-hmm. And we also have absurd defensive records from Burnley and Sheffield United as well. I wonder, could we get like a 60 points at home from Sheffield United or Leeds? Something, like 19 wins or something ludicrous. Or could we get, look at Burnley have conceded 8 goals. Mike Cooper for Sheffield United hasn't conceded a goal at Bramall Lane. So can we homogenise this? Keep going with that. God, imagine can he go all the way up to Easter?
I think Burnley, just bringing it back to Burnley, the record, I think, is 30 goals conceded across the Championship season.
Karanka's Middlesbrough side in 15-16 got conceded very few, and then was there another?
There's Watford in the COVID season, surprisingly.
That Middlesbrough side, Simon, went from like December to February without, I think they had like 9 clean sheets in a row. So something around one of those parachute teams in the top 3, there'll be a ridiculous home record, a defensive record.
I agree with you. I think Burnley smashed that goals conceded record.
And Trafford looked great in the game against Norwich yesterday. He's really starting to justify. I know. I was talking to Derby fans the other day saying, well, we played Burnley the other day. Their keeper cost more than our entire team times 10 or whatever, So he should be good, but I think he's starting to justify it, isn't he now?
Absolutely.
Gab, crazy predictions from you?
Crazy prediction.
Hot take, anything you've got.
I think Portsmouth are better than their league position suggests. I think they've had a couple of no-shows, don't get me wrong, including one at Derby on Friday night and one at Stoke. So
really responded well to the Stoke one. This run came straight after that, didn't
exactly. And I think since Cobber Bishop came back for them, they've significantly improved. I really like Callum Lang. And I think that they're going to recruit some experience in January that's going to sort of beef up their defence. And what I really like, I saw a lot from John Mousinho last season as a character in terms of his ability to encourage his team to respond really well to setbacks. And I'm pretty sure that they've got the mental fortitude to come through these difficult spells. So for me, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see Portsmouth play up and stay up and sort of climb up the league.
I think we might be in the last few, maybe 6 months of Danny Roll at Sheffield Wednesday, not in a negative sense.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
I think he is, I'd put him, Corberán above him, and then Danny Roll probably is my second favourite manager in the Championship right now. I think he's massively overperforming with that Sheffield Wednesday squad. I don't think it's out of the question they can finish in the top 6 this season. I think 5 points off right now, some great teams up there.
And a European team would take him as well, wouldn't they?
He's fashionable. Yeah. He plays good football. He's overperformed. Look at the work he's done at Wednesday. I don't know if he'd walk out mid-season, but I could see it. But certainly in the summer, I think he's probably going to get poached by a club with slightly higher kind of aspirations, whatever you want to call it, budget, better squad. I think a parachute team would have him.
He's now about to set up Ipswich go down, McKenna leaves, Danny Roll to Ipswich in the Championship next season, isn't he?
Would you be against that? Obviously you love McKenna. I wouldn't see McKenna leaving.
I'd obviously be against it, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility, is it?
They're good. They're good hot takes. We'll come back to them at the end of the season and see how we've got on.
That's your hot take, by the way. That was nothing to do with me, Ipswich fans, yeah?
Writing that off. Let's have a look at a couple of games happening this weekend. A couple we've picked out. Plymouth versus Middlesbrough. First of all, home park's been excellent for Plymouth, kind of so far this season compared to their form on the road.
Sure.
They need to be winning games at home, Gab, if they're going to have any chance of survival. Is this one of them?
Yeah, I think there's some encouragement. There's a kind of a glimmer of hope, I think, for Plymouth Argyle from the performance at Sheffield United, especially first half at Bramall Lane. And that's the one crumb of comfort that I think Wayne Rooney can take, because there's been far too many games this season where Plymouth Argyle haven't turned up at all. Injuries haven't helped, but they've been a little bit too passive for my liking. And some games where you just think, they were miles off it. That wasn't the case at Sheffield United, so that performance has got to be a starting point where they can take it, take some form from that and encouragement from that game. So that's going to be crucial for them.
Ben, how do you see this one going?
It's difficult because you frame it. I want to push back a little on your framing of they've got to win these games. Isn't the argument got to score some points away from home? I know they built a League One promotion. To be fair, there's something, you speak to Plymouth journalists about this, about the geography. For decades, Plymouth have struggled with this home-away paradigm. You do feel Middlesbrough are a team that they can score against, but Middlesbrough are also a team they can concede 2 or 3 against, aren't they? But I think January's going to be interesting for Rooney as well, and I think he's harshly judged, which we've discussed before. I think 23rd is probably 1 or 2 places lower than par, maybe, for Plymouth, being they've got a season under their belts. But can they? How did you put it? Middlesbrough's chance creation. Can they? Yeah. Can they keep that XG under 2.5 or whatever, yeah?
Finn Azar's coming back to home park as
good
well.
Shout that, yeah.
And Ben Doka's looked amazing for Middlesbrough as well. So I think those two are so dangerous for Middlesbrough, and they just seem to carve out chance after chance.
I'll push you both for a score prediction, please.
3-1 to Middlesbrough.
Yeah, I think it's both teams to score and a Borough win.
Lovely stuff. I would be surprised at this point if Plymouth don't finish bottom. That's actually how I feel about Plymouth right now. I think they're in
with a managerial change, Simon.
I think Rooney will get longer than expected. They might do another maybe in March when the writing's on the wall. They might throw the baby out the bathwater. But I think it'll be too late. I'm not sure it's particularly reflective of Rooney as a manager. This is a really tough squad to keep up, I think, but I think you're probably right. They're probably 1 or 2 places lower than they should be. The other game we're going to have a quick look at is Leeds versus Oxford. Managerless Oxford United going to Elland Road. Bit of a bloodbath, maybe, Ben?
I think Gab's sharp intake of breath, which hopefully producer Seb is going to pick up there, says everything. That is the worst possible fixture they could have got, isn't it? And I don't know whether some poor soul on the staff is going to be taking the team or whether someone's going to have been announced.
Perhaps.
Often, Gab, though, they try and protect the new manager in situations like this, but conversely doing that throws the caretaker under the bus to go to Elland Road. You would expect a heavy home win.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think going to Elland Road, as you'll have known, Simon, as a Coventry fan, can just this relentless experience of it's so difficult to look after the ball, and sometimes you can be forced into clearing it, and it's just going to come back and back and back. And I think eventually it's very difficult not to kind of cave in, and I think that's shown in the number of teams that have struggled with going to Elland Road. So yeah, I'm sure Oxford will try and put in do you know what? I think if Oxford United lose 2-0, but put in a spirited performance and create a few chances in the first half. Not that you'd take that, but I think that would be, you want to come out of that game with some sort of encouragement as opposed to
archetypal Elland Road scoreline this season, isn't it? 2-0.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost as Plymouth did at Sheffield United, I guess. I mean, they lost the game, but
you take something from the game. I think that's what you always want to try and see.
Brings us nicely onto your corner of conserve, Gab, for this week.
Yeah, I'm worried about Oxford United now. I think a lot's going to be dictated by January. I was kind of... It's funny, isn't it? Because I think in the summer I was talking quite in a way quite enthusiastically about the recruitment, in the sense they've not been afraid to look left field. They've looked at players who have done well in League Two and League One, and they've invested in players. I think if they come down to League One, for instance, I think they're going to have a brilliant squad for that level. But maybe they made it harder as well for Des Buckingham by not bringing in a little bit more Championship experience. That obviously comes at a premium. I think they've got a really high value squad that can grow together, but whether it's cut out for the dogfight at the moment, I think they're going to need another striker in January, probably another centre half as well, and really sort of strengthen that spine of the team.
It's really difficult, isn't it? Are you more or less concerned about Oxford now Buckingham's gone, Ben?
Oh, God.
In terms of relegation, because that's all the goal is, isn't it?
Well, there's a chance the bottom falls out of it, isn't there? That someone comes in, and if he was overperforming already, then, you know, there's a lower floor to come. But there's also a chance someone can turn it around. Depends a lot on the hire. I'd have to give that a lot of thought. It's a great question.
So it's very difficult to do this when we don't know who's coming in.
True, yeah.
He's just been sacked. It's a really interesting one. Also think Leeds Oxford's part of your Championship treble this week.
Yes, so I think Leeds United will beat Oxford, fairly straightforward, that one. What else have I got?
You've got Middlesbrough to win at Plymouth.
Middlesbrough to win at Plymouth Argyle. It's that page, thank you. What would I do without you then? Right, so yes, so I've also got Sunderland to beat Norwich, because Sunderland's home form has been pretty strong this season, and Norwich are without some key players. I just don't think they're the same without Josh Sargent. I felt it last season with Norwich, and I feel it this season, even though I'm really impressed with the work that Johannes Hofthorp is doing. I think they're going through a difficult moment at the moment.
It's the ultimate thing with Norwich, isn't it? They've got such a good striker who can only play half the season almost, Ben, and it really limits them. But again, impressed with Thorpe so far? I'm down the middle. I've never failed to be impressed with Norwich's ability to build stars, and always have. Wherever they are, whenever you think they're going to struggle, and believe me, this is a conversation that is put to me a lot given my allegiances, you always look at Norwich and say, even, you know, like Cordoba who comes in, Nunez, Sargent, Sainz, there's always great value in the squad. What's the Croat lad? Cernak. Yeah. You know, they always build stars and have good assets. So I'm never... Norwich fans are always more worried about Norwich than I am, because I'm like, nah, you'll trade really well. You'll trade your way out of it.
Isn't that funny? I think sometimes when you're on the outside, it's easier to see the bigger picture, whereas when you're in it, when you're a fan, when you're in it, it's like, oh my God. But just to kind of back up your point about Norwich, I think they recruit so well. Like Callum Doyle looks a great signing as well. And do you know what? I think this team reminds me a little bit of Daniel Farke's first season, where they're a little bit unrefined.
Give the ball to Maddison, yeah?
Yeah, possibly, yeah. But then I feel like they might even be a little bit further along in terms of their development than they were then. But I think next season you'll see the real, Hofball 2.0, I think, is what you'll see next season from Norwich. For now, I think they're maybe in a bit of a transitional period.
Absolutely. And we like to finish with a fun question, a fun Christmas question this week as well, because Gladiators, everyone's favourite show, is back on telly over Christmas. So if you had to pick a player or a manager currently in the Championship to take them on in Gladiators and win, someone, I don't know, guess big, strong, with a bit of aggression, who would you pick and why?
Oh, can I say, I think Scott Parker would say, "Are you not entertained?"
Having conceded no goals.
I love Carlton Morris, but do you remember Wolf in Gladiators used to argue with referee John Anderson all the time? Carlton Morris likes a dialogue with referees, let's just say.
And his own players, after what we saw with Liam Walsh this weekend, after he was sent off, shoving him off the pitch, wasn't he?
I made Carlton Morris right in that as captain there, to be fair. And we've got to go for your manager. I always have this image of Frank Lampard. He was told he couldn't run. He's out in his spikes in the rain, training. If Frank Lampard had to go and be a neuroscientist, he'd be the best neuroscientist. If he's going on Gladiators, he will have a bespoke plan as to how to win the giant cotton buds and the travelator at the end. So Frank Lampard and Carlton Morris.
That is a brilliant duo. I just want to see Chris Wilder on the cotton buds thing.
He played dirty.
Dirty. He'd have everything you
He'd probably win.
He would probably win. What about you, Gab?
I think I was kind of looking through the Championship managers and wondering who could do the impersonation of the main character. I've only seen the film once, actually, so I'm trying to run it through back in my head. But yeah, I'll go with your shout on Chris Wilder.
Brilliant stuff, right? Thank you very much, guys. We'll like and subscribe. Leave your comments down below. That's it from us before Christmas. We'll be back after the festivities with more championship review. Like and subscribe as always. But that is it for this week's edition of the Sportsman Untitled. We'll see you next time.